Hello and welcome. My name is Zaffar Iqbal, and you are watching the Mojo Story. The country is still in a shock and mourning the helicopter crash in which the CDS, General Bipin Rawat, and 12 other military personnel were killed. Uh, we want to understand today that who will succeed General Rawat as the new Chief of Defense Staff, and what's the procedure involved in that, and also the reform process that was set in motion by General Rawat, how it will be carried forward. That's what we'll discuss. We have an eminent panel that joins us today. We're joined by Major General Dhruv Katoch, who is the editor of Salute magazine. We're also joined by Ambreen Zaidi, who's an author, and also Ranjit Kumar, who's a senior journalist. But before we go into those specifics, uh, there are still speculation that what led to this crash. There are many theories that are making rounds. In fact, the IAF had put out a tweet to set those speculations at rest. And in fact, I want to read that tweet. It had said that the Indian Air Force has constituted a tri-service court of inquiry to investigate the cause of the tragic helicopter accident on 8th December 2021. The inquiry would be completed expeditiously and facts brought out till then to reflect the dignity of the deceased. Uninformed speculation may be avoided. Uh, basically, before we go to the heart of the matter, I want to ask Ambreen that these speculations that are making rounds, what do they mean for the families of of the defense personnel that unfortunately died in that helicopter crash?
Well, Zafar, this is a life changing moment for the families. It's a huge and a very tragic turning point. And I've been working for the war widows, and I deal with them on a daily basis. And it's heartbreaking. Even no matter how brave you are, how strong you are, but you've lost your loved one. So we are in shock. The nation is in shock. The forces are in shock. So imagine what the families must be going through. But they will have to
Yes.
collect themselves and, gain strength from each other and move forward. That is all that we are left with.
Absolutely, and at a time when the inquiry is still going on, these speculations are just refusing to die. Uh, the question also is that families would also be wanting some sort of a closure, but you have to give some time for the inquiry process to get completed.
Exactly, exactly. So we will wait for the court of inquiry to get over, and I'm sure
Yeah.
we'll all get to know what reason it and what led to it.
Yes, absolutely. So obviously, everybody would want to know the reasons that led to this crash. The families would also want to have a sense of closure, but we'll have to wait till the court of inquiry is completed. But Major General Dhruv Katoch, if I may ask you, the appointment of the next chief of the defense staff, the government has already started the process. Could it happen right away, or perhaps a senior military officer, a senior serving officer, could be given an additional responsibility?
When we are looking at the post of the next CDS,
Mm.
the persons who can actually become the next CDS from amongst the serving fraternity is one of the three chiefs, either of the army, the navy, or the air force. Now,
Yes.
there has been speculation that we can pick up any other officer who is serving, but in my view, that is not practicable because any other officer who is serving is of a lieutenant general or equivalent rank. So let us say he could be an army commander, but he's a lieutenant general. And
Yeah.
for a person of a lieutenant general or equivalent rank to take over as the CDS, in my view, will be improper. So the choice will rest amongst the three serving service chiefs. One.
Yeah.
Number two, the government also has the option of taking in one of the recently retired service chiefs.
Yeah.
You see, there have been precedents earlier. If you take post the Second World War, Field Marshal Sir William Slim had retired, and when Montgomery stepped down as the chief of the Imperial Defense Staff, that was the time when they roped in Field Marshal William Slim. So he was called back from retirement and given the appointment. Ultimately, I feel that is the decision of the government as to whom they take in. And in my view, it will be from either amongst the three service chiefs, or you can add, it could be from one of the either the Air Force or the naval chief who have retired very recently. The government may choose to appoint them also.
But the retirement age has been set at 65. That's the point. That
Yes.
that
No, no, but
that thing is very clear.
no, the retirement age may have been set at 65, but please remember that the chiefs had retired just 2 years back. That means, I beg your pardon, they have retired this year itself. So they won't be more than 63 years old in any event, either of the two service chiefs. So
Yeah,
that is the only choice which the government has got. They don't have any choice beyond that, right? So, in
yeah,
my view, it should be one amongst the three service chiefs. They do
yeah,
not have to go by seniority. It is
yeah,
up to the government whom they make. Making of a service chief is the prerogative of the government of the day, and it
yeah,
does not necessarily have to be by seniority. So
yeah.
this is the way I think it will pan out, and I feel in the interest of continuity, it should be done in the fastest possible moment.
Yeah. And if I may, Ranjit Kumar, if I may ask you, then if we go by the seniority criteria, then perhaps the current chief, General Narwane, he's the senior most and he's due to retire in April. So perhaps he's the front runner.
You are right. See, at a time when Indian and Chinese soldiers are staring at each other on the eastern Ladakh border, governments should not delay the naming of the appointment of the Chief of Defence Staff. It will lead to a lot of speculation in the armed forces among the public, and it will lead to a leadership crisis also. So the government should go by seniority criteria. The three serving four-star generals are the senior most generals in the Indian Armed Forces, and by seniority, General Narwane is the senior most army chief and senior most four-star general also. So I think the post of chief of defense staff should go to him to avoid any resentment among the top commanders of the armed forces.
Yes, and you mentioned about an important point, the standoff between India and China that's still going on in Ladakh for so many months now. It's a very critical time. Perhaps that's the time when somebody who is in the know of the things, who has been there, perhaps the army chief who knows the entire thing that's panned out in Ladakh, would be in a better know-how of dealing with the situation, though we understand that army is an institution. Yeah, do you hear me?
Hello,
Yeah, do you hear me,
you're
Ranjit?
asking me?
Yeah, I'm asking you.
Not fully audible. Not fully audible. Can you repeat the?
I'm saying that you raised an important point. This is happening at a time when Indian and Chinese forces are in a standoff position in Ladakh that's there for so many months. So, given the situation that's existing right now, Jalna Narwane is perhaps the best choice.
Yeah, this is what I said earlier. The senior most
Yeah,
army commander, the senior most service chiefs should be appointed as the chief of defense staff. See, at this moment, this is a very critical moment for Indian armed forces. Indian army and Chinese army are face to face at the Ladakh borders, and the situation is very delicate. It needs the directions of the highest command of the Indian armed forces as soon as possible. There should not be any vacuum among the top leadership of the armed forces. The government must immediately appoint, name as a chief of defense staff as soon as possible.
yes, clearly the government has already set the process in motion. But if we talk about the reform process that was started by General Bipin Rawat, he was the first chief of defense staff. Particularly the theater commands, the integration of the army. General Katoch, do you think that there could be some sort of a setback in that?
No, I don't think there will be a setback because the process is systemic now, right? Obviously, what General Rawat did was he gave it a push. You see, that is where
Yeah.
the leadership role comes in. And
Mm.
because General Rawat had an excellent rapport with the political authority, with the bureaucracy, with Mr. Doval, Mr. Doval, who's the NSA, and with the service chiefs, with the chief of the army, chief of the navy, and with the chief of the air staff, I think that synergy which he brought to the job was very important, and that moved things at a very fast pace. But I would like to also inform all your viewers that the this reform process, the very aspect of theaterization and jointness, is a very long-term project. When it started in the United States, it took them the better part of 18 to 20 years to really get what they wanted. In our case, I think it won't take 18 to 20 years. I'm looking at a time frame of 8 to 10 years, and out of which the process has started for 2 years. So what General Rawat has done so far, before his unfortunate passing away in that accident, what he has done, he has laid a very strong foundation. And it is on this foundation that his successor will have to build on and take the process forward as far as theatre commands are concerned.
Ranjit Kumar, a strong foundation has been laid, and it's now only to take it forward. That's the biggest challenge that the new chief of defense staff would face.
Yes, that's the need of the hour. The three armed forces must be integrated as soon as possible because of the advancing technology in the weapon systems. All the three forces, the three forces must have an integrated structure to fight and to launch an operation. See, it's not the old days of 71 war or 62 war. Even in 62 war, we have already seen how there was lack of synergy between the three armed forces. The air force was not used, and at this moment, the air force and the army, they must launch an operation in a synergized manner, and for that we need an integrated structure. For that, a theater command needs to be set up in various parts of the country. 5 or 7 theater commands are right now are under proposal. This theater command should be set up as soon as possible to face our enemies, adversaries on the northern and western sector as soon as possible.
Yes, and also integration as far as acquisition of weapons is concerned. Every military wing has its own wish list, then they give to the government. But here, it all collects together. When there is the institution of the chief of defense staff, it all comes together, and then perhaps in a more streamlined form, it's given to the government, and acquisitions can be done.
Yes, there are a lot of duplication of weapon systems also. For example, in army aviation, army wants the same helicopter, the air force also wants same helicopter. So why there should be a duplication? There should be a common structure for
Yeah.
for launching any operation on the borders.
Yes, General Katoch, you agree?
You see, when we are looking at the acquisition process, it is both from getting our requirements both from the indigenous industry, that is the public and the private sector, as well as getting them from abroad. Now, to let us take a weapon system like a certain missiles which are fired from the ships. Now, you'll be surprised that similar missiles may also be used by the army on a land mode, right? The nomenclature may be different, but actually it is the same missile sourced from the same supplier. So the Navy will go about it in the older system in its own way. The Army will do it in its own way, and the Air Force will carry out its own methodology. Now, in an integrated structure, all of this will be done by one agency. I think that gives you much better payoffs. One, you avoid duplication. Number two,
Yeah.
because you are ordering the quantum which is required by all the three services together, you get a better deal. And third, because we know what the requirements are, I think it can be better projected even to the indigenous industry. Listen, this is what we want. Can the private sector or the public sector actually chip in and get this for us in a particular time frame? So the logistics support, this base, I think, is a very, very important one. And there are many logistic functions. It is not just the supply of weapons. the supply of petroleum products, the supply of rations, the supply of clothing, etc., etc. All of this can be streamlined into one integrated structure of the armed forces. We don't need to have three structures for logistics. We can have one structure. And this is a very, very important aspect as far as jointness is concerned.
Yes, that's very important. And also, the threat perception keeps on changing. The developments that are taking place in our neighborhood, the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan, the threat from Pakistan, do you think it's a dynamic situation where you have to adopt constantly?
You see, when we are looking at the threat perception, one thing which we need to understand is that earlier the three services were doing their own perception as to how, if a battle is fought, what is our role in it. Now, the first step in the integration process took place some years earlier, where the headquarter IDS, the Integrated Defense Staff, was formed. But it was still not a complete structure because the post of the CDS was lacking. Now, while the headquarter IDS did some human work, and their contribution is in no way small, and it continues to work now. And now, of course, they have a CDS. But the important point of it is that when we are looking at a threat now, and we say that the threat emanates from the northern borders, the western borders, it could emanate from the Gulf, it could emanate from the South China Sea. There is a methodology now of dealing with it, where not just the three services. I think the integration is far more than the three services. Obviously, the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force will get together. But it is much more than that. Now, I think the political authority also gets together. Our intelligence agencies also get together. And having Mr. Doval there, I think, is a great plus point. He understands these issues. Wars, I am afraid, are no longer fought by the armed forces alone. Today, the wars are fought by the nation. It is a complete system now, right? That means the whole nation is at war. When we go to war, it is 1.3 plus Indians, a billion Indians going to war, right? So each one of us, including the public, has to be a part of this process. And I think this, once we get the office of the CDS, because the CDS provides that single point advice to the Raksha Mantri, right? He's got direct access to the Prime Minister. That is a very important aspect. Otherwise, people are, he's getting views from different quarters. Now he's getting views from one quarter, and the CDS has already carried out this coordination amongst the service chiefs. I want you to understand one thing, that just a few days, in fact, just on the very day that General Rawat died, there was a function in the morning, early in the Air Force auditorium, which I attended, where the Chief of Air Staff was speaking. And he made one point very clear, because that time we did not know about the accident, it hadn't occurred. He made it very clear. He says the three service chiefs are united and are supportive of the integration process. So you see, this has been a very great achievement over the last 2 years, that the Army, Navy, and Air Force are on the same page as far as theater command and all other aspects of integration are concerned, right? They may have minor differences here and there, but that is the job of the CDS to sort out. So I think process-wise, we are well on the cards. And this was a step which preferably should have been taken right in 1972 when Indira Gandhi wanted it, but it was scuttled at that time. Then it was scuttled again during Vajpayee's tenure. And this time, I think it got through because the Prime Minister made a very firm announcement. And once you announce it from the Red Fort, it becomes, it is a fait accompli. That is the way the Americans did it also. They did it through legislation. The service chiefs could not get on board on their own. So finally, there was a legislation which was put in, and through that legislative process, this came into law. I think India is moving on the same lines, and we have got other countries' experience to also look at, though, of course, our situation is different. So I think we will take about 8 to 10 years for the process to settle in. There will be teething problems, but I think that is part of the system. To say that everything will function smoothly from the word go is not going to happen. There will be teething problems, but I think they will resolve it. There is great maturity in the service chiefs, and whomsoever is appointed as the CDS, I'm sure he will carry the task forward appropriately.
Ambreen, General Katoch made an important point. That's not just the armies which are fighting on the borders, but it's the entire nation. You have written a book, The Warrior Widows. Obviously, the families of these defense personnel who died in that helicopter crash, or who are dying in other places in the country, where there is militancy at the borders. What do you think? What do you have to say about this collective approach as a nation, when such a big tragedy falls, like the death of the topmost military officer of the country?
Well, it's tragic indeed. It's shocking, as I said. But what happens with with the families is the army is always there. The initial days, the formalities, the finances, everything, whatever compensations. Initially, the media glare is also there, and separate. There's so many governments they announce the compensations, but finally, when it comes down to getting their due rights, it's the very basic small little issue which is left behind, not by the army. Things have been approved by the army headquarters, by the MOD, by the state government, but the family is still you know fighting for it. They've not got it due to some little issue, some little insecurity on the part of a civilian authority of that area. So they keep fighting, and then they don't know, they're running pillar to post. The best we can do is, as I said in my other session with some other channel, see, it is very easy to identify your families who have whose sons and husbands have made these supreme sacrifices. You just have to walk into the Zilla Sainik Kalyan Board and find out. You'll find so many families fighting their battles. But I must tell you, in my book, I've covered 30 stories, and I tried to cover ladies who've who've been never heard of. And there's this lady who said, "Madam, गांव वालों ने बहुत परेशान किया, घर वालों ने डिसोन कर दिया, पैसों के चक्कर में घर पे भी कब्जा कर लिया। और लेकिन मैम, जब सैनिक कार्यालय जाते हैं ना, या सैनिक भवन जाते हैं, तो ऐसा लगता है जैसे अपने मैके आ गए हैं।"
Mhm.
And that is a huge statement, because army is one big family and we're there for each one of us. होता है कहीं पे कहीं कुछ glitches हो जाते हैं, कमियां रह जाती हैं. There are cases where people are not able to do the formalities, but then there are people to help out also. There are many veterans, serving officers also in their capacity, who help out these families in their areas. So we are a big, large family, always ready to help each other.
But there is this constant problem that's not just in army but in other spheres of our society also, battling this red tapeism, this bureaucracy that sort of puts brakes on the system and slows down the entire process.
Yes, that is why one lady from my book, Bhagirathi Devi ji, from her husband was killed in action in 1962 war. She's yet to get her dues. Imagine. Now she's 88 years of age, and when I speak to her, she's lost all the hope. And kyun? Because there was some issue that the village pradhan had. Imagine. Adjutant General had approved everything. MOD se sab ho gaya tha. Chief Minister had approved everything. So that hurts you. Still fighting. Now they have given up. Now her son is grown up and he's working in somewhere, but then they've given up on the compensation part ke nahi milega, just because of one person. Bureaucracy bhi छोड़िए, प्रधान villages में तो वो बहुत, they're very powerful people, right? So they were supposed to get a good amount of land, or maybe a petrol pump or a gas agency. They couldn't get anything. So that is what. So we have to, hold their hands and hearts and work, solve their issues, whatever they may be.
That's very sad when you hear such stories. Perhaps that's another reason, when we talk about integration, putting things right together, and that's one of the duties of the Chief of Defense Staff, to integrate the things, whether it's different wings of the military or it's about acquisition. I was also reading about the age of retirement age of those people who are not out in the field in the operations, but staff like engineers and others. Something can be done about that, because the retirement age is less. Perhaps that can be increased. Those are also some of the important factors that the chief of defense staff looks into. So do you think, General Katoch, not just at the operational level, but the position of the CDS is also important on other levels also?
You see, what has happened is that the CDS is wearing multiple hats now. So when he's the CDS, he will look into operational aspects, logistics, and all that. But the second hat which he's wearing, he is also the secretary in the Ministry of Defense.
Yeah.
Department of Military Affairs. He's the secretary. Now, when he's wearing that hat, all these aspects which you have spoken about just now, all of them will get in. He will look into them. Now, I think because of the service conditions, because of the fact that for the last 40 years the CDS has been through the mill. He knows what these problems are. He understands these problems. I think he's in a better position to deal with it as a secretary to the government of India. So that is why it was important to put him into the decision-making loop. Otherwise, if you simply had the CDS without getting him inside the government as a secretary to the government of India, things wouldn't have moved at all. Because one thing which people need to understand is that if you're not within the government, you have no financial powers at all. You see, all those powers to carry out any changes rest with the secretaries to the government of India. That is how the rules have been made since independence, right? So the armed forces were kept out. We were simply an attached office of the Ministry of Defense. So all the rules, all the decisions were made by the defense secretary, the joint secretaries, etc. Right? The inputs may have been given by the armed forces, but the decision making was by the civilian bureaucracy. Now that a major shift has taken place, because now this decision making to a very great extent, or to at least to some extent, will be made on matters which concern the armed forces by the military personnel themselves, who understand what the issues are. So I think that when we go ahead and look into these issues over the next, say, 5 years or 10 years, or if we have a program like this, say even 5 years from now, you will be able to see that distinct change which has been made, and the small points of which act as a dampener. I think all of those issues will also get resolved. That civil military liaison bit, you see, as to how to deal with those issues, because now the orders will be issued from the government side. That means from the secretary, the CDS acting as the secretary to the government of India. And when that happens, that has a different impact altogether. So based on the type of hats he's wearing, the CDS will function accordingly. And the Department of Military Affairs is now staffed by military officers. There are officers of 2-star and 3-star ranks there who are doing the job. And I think that's a very important step towards fulfilling what the armed forces require.
The foundation has been laid, but it will take some years to see the things really taking a shape. That's essentially what you see. Ranjit, Kumar, earlier you raised an important point about the situation along the line of actual control. The Indian forces and the Chinese, they are in a situation of a face standoff for many months now. With the passing of the chief of defense staff, do you think there will be any change on the ground as far as operations are concerned, or nothing like that sort is expected? Because after all, army is an institution; it follows a particular strategy.
No, the level of combat preparedness will not be affected. I don't think so. But the government must see to it that a higher command structure is immediately put in place, so that to give the armed forces proper guidance at each point of time. And this is why the immediate appointment of Chief of Defense Staff is needed, so that to urgently meet the challenge that is being faced by Indian armed forces on the eastern Ladakh border.
General Katoch, what's your sense?
The tension which is prevailing on the eastern, on our border with the border with China, or the tension which is prevailing on our border with Pakistan. Now, those are specific issues which the men on the ground will handle. when we are looking at handling it from the all-out government level, it is something like if these tensions escalate, then what do we do? Just to put it in a different way, can we pressurize China for the actions which they are doing in eastern Ladakh? Can we pressurize them now in the Indo-Pacific? You see, as part of the Quad. Now, those are the issues which the CDS is better handled to do, is in a better position to do, rather than the service chief. The service chief individually cannot carry out those actions. Similarly, with Pakistan, if you are dealing with a country like that, it is simply not stopping a few terrorists from coming in, and those are the minor threats, really. It is dealing with that government, right? It is dealing with that military as to how best can those people be, how pressure can be brought to bear on the military of Pakistan so that they change their ways. You see, they are using terrorism as an instrument of state policy. Now, addressing the terrorists is not going to be the solution. That is the easiest part of it. Addressing the military is what the problem is. So here, again, when I spoke of the whole of government approach, here we get on to diplomacy, we get on to finances, we get on to multiple issues, right? And the pressure of the government of India is not simply military pressure. There are multiple points. It is the government, it is politics, it is diplomacy, it is finance, it is economy, it is trade. All these instruments can be used to put pressure and tell them, because ultimately the fight is not with the people of Pakistan per se, it is with the system which they have adopted. But that system is not going to change. And that is the whole tragedy of South Asia. That the Pakistan, the government is controlled by the military. It is not Imran Khan, he's the incidental actor. I mean, he's there, he's the face, but ultimately he is not in control. Similarly, when we deal with the situation in China, China is a very, very powerful neighbor, right? Now, simply addressing the issue at the military level will not be adequate. So it may have to be addressed on different fronts. Our trade relations, our economic relations, all that will also come into play. Diplomacy will come into play into how we deal with China. And that is why I mentioned the whole of government approach. But looking into the specific question which you asked on the line of control or the line of actual control itself, the local commanders will handle it the way they are handling it now. And I think they are very, very competent to carry out the task as given to them by the military leadership and by the political authority.
The local commanders will deal with the situation. They have been dealing with it in the past, but the passing away of the Chief of Defence Staff at this juncture has obviously shaken the country and the defence establishment. Perhaps it would take a lot of time to get the things right on track again, and to have the new Chief of Defence Staff in the office. But clearly it's a big tragedy that has befallen the country. Thanks so much to our panelists for joining us. That's all we have in today's show. Thanks for watching.
It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.